Hello, everyone. My name is Viktorija, and I'm a second-year student of the graduate study of conservation restoration of textiles at the University of Dubrovnik. Today, I would like to talk to you about diagnostic analysis using endoscopic and microscopic investigation techniques applied in conservation and restoration of a 19th century handbag from the Ethnographic Museum in Dubrovnik. The 19th century handbag from the Ethnographic Museum belongs to the collection of fall costumes of the Dubrovnik Littoral and the Fiti as part of the festive women's ceremonial costume of the Adriatic type. The handbag is composed of various materials such as silk, wool, and cotton, colorful fabrics, and decorative ribbons, as well as the metal threads and round metal embellishments. Scientific analysis of historic textile objects can be an extremely useful tool in the understanding of the object's history, construction, and decay. This presentation will show what analytical methods have been used and how the information collected have impacted the approach to the conservation restoration of the handbag. On the right side, you can see the methods used, listed from approaching the object as a whole with digital photography, down to a single fiber using an optical microscope. Photo documentation is a fundamental part of the conservation restoration documentation as a whole, along with different diagrams, tables, sketches, written information, etc. Photographs of the object are important for a number of causes in the conservation restoration process, such as documenting the current state of the object. They can also help prove whether there had been any changes in the material. They can illustrate how the object might have been used in the past, and so on. The point of taking digital photographs while the object is going through the conservation restoration process is to consistently document all phases of conservation restoration work. Here, you can see an overall photograph of the front side of the object before the conservation restoration process. Photographs like this should contain a color target scale because they contain chromatographic and tonal values that are relevant for the photograph and some form of identification. In this case, this is the inventory number assigned to the object at the Ethnographic Museum. Before any of the conservation restoration work starts, and during the first visual investigation of an object, photographs of important details, such as discoloration, stains, holes, damages, and structural features should be taken. Here, on the left photograph, you can see an example of damaged decorative ribbon that has significant amount of material loss. On the right photograph, you can see a hole in the main fabric through which the lining of the bag is visible. After the initial examination and after all necessary photo documentation was made, it was decided that the decorative ribbons from the bottom of the handbag would be removed, because they're only attached by a single stitch and are in very poor condition. So there was a risk of further damage or loss of material due to handling of the object during the conservation restoration work. They will be removed and work will be done on each individual ribbon separately. And at the end of the whole conservation restoration work, they will be reattached. The rest of the ribbons couldn't be removed without separating the layers of the handbag, so a piece of very fine tulle was sewn around them to protect them. Further information on the construction of materials will be needed to fully document the object. An endoscope is an optical device that makes it possible to see inside of three-dimensional objects. It can give insight to the inner structures of objects and possible damage or deterioration that wouldn't be otherwise visible. For this purpose, the device on the photo was used, called the HD Visual Cleaner, which consists of a probe that has a light and a camera on one end and that can be connected to a mobile phone. Both photographs and videos can be taken that way. The reason why endoscopic investigation was necessary was to examine if the damage visible on the outside of a bag was also present on the lining, or if the lining itself had been damaged. Also, there were still questions about the construction of the handbag that couldn't have been answered by simply looking at the outer side of the handbag, such as, do the stitches connecting the decorative elements to the handbag run through all of the layers of the handbag? Or how many fragments of fabric is the lining composed of? Answers to these and similar questions were important because based on information obtained, the decision was to be made about whether or not some elements of the bag could be separated if needed, or if that would greatly compromise the integrity and authenticity of the bag. Here is a short video of the examination of the inside of the handbag using the device. To make sure the exact places that needed to be examined were examined from the inside, pins were used to mark those places. Those places were places that had stitches or significant damage that could have been present on the lining of the handbag. On the left photograph, you can see a pin marking the spot of a relatively large hole on the main fabric. And on the right side, you can see a photograph taken from the inside of the bag, and there is no visible damage to the lining of the handbag, meaning that the damage is contained to the main fabric. In this example, you can see on the left photograph a pin marking the spot next to a stitch that attaches the decorative element to the ribbon. And on the right side, you can see a photograph taken from the inside of the bag, and there are stitches next to the pin that correspond to those visible on the outside that prove that the layers are joined together with stitches that go through all of the layers, decorative elements, the main fabric, and finally the lining. On the left photograph, you can see a pin marking, I'm sorry for the mistake. There were many new information obtained with this method. Firstly, that the lining isn't made of various fragments, like the outside of the bag, but rather that the lining is made of one single piece of fabric. Then that the damage that is visible on the outside of the bag, such as holes and tears, isn't present on the inside. The lining is very well preserved and there is no serious damage or decay apart from the accumulated dirt at the bottom of the bag. Also, the stitches that were used to sew the decorative element in the silk ribbon go through all of the layers and are visible on the inside. This means that those stitches are holding together all of the different elements that the bag consists of. This information led to the conclusion that the body of the handbag and its layers will not be separated, and that the original stitching will be kept because the removal would result in loss of authenticity and would be considered an unnecessary intervention. The device used for the next investigation method was the DinoLite digital microscope. Digital microscopes allow the textile to be observed at yarn level, where different parameters can be measured, such as thread count and yarn thickness. This is important not only for detailed documentation of the object, but also if there is a need for a new fabric support, it can aid in choosing the right one that is as close as possible to the original, meaning that they have similar qualities and aesthetic values. Every type of fabric on the object was examined, but to not make this presentation too long, this red fabric will be shown as an example. The photograph on the left is a photograph of the red fabric taken with the DinoLite digital microscope. And this photograph, among others, provided many information about the weave of the fabric. Those details can be seen in the table on the right. DinoLite was also used to document details of the damage present on the object. On the photograph, you can see a hole in the main white fabric. The edges of the hole are uneven, which means that they were probably a result of friction or wear. Had it been a laceration by a sharp blade, the edges would have been even. This investigation method enabled documentation of the parameters of all fabrics that the handbag consists of. This information also helps with the choice of new fabrics for consolidation and support of the original historic textiles. The parameters also show that the 3 red fragments are made of the same fabric, as well as the 2 white fragments, due to the fact that the parameters of those fragments correspond with one another. More precise identification can be made using an optical microscope, and that is one on a fiber level. The purpose of sampling and the selection of analytical methods should be known and chosen prior to sampling. That way, the person taking the samples can be sure of quality and size of the sample needed. This ensures that no precious material of the original textile is wasted. Using a microscope, natural fibers can be recognized as a part of 2 groups: animal fibers consisting of proteins such as keratin or fibrin, and vegetable fibers that contain cellulose. It is then possible to differentiate between different types of animal fibers by the pattern of their scales, and vegetable fibers by their cell structure. Microphotographs of a variety of fibers are available in reference books. However, it is better to have a collection of known examples with which to compare the unknown ones. At the University of Dubrovnik workshop for textile conservation restoration, there are microphotographs of reference fibers provided by the Faculty of Textile Technology, University of Zagreb. On the left side of this slide, you can see a photograph of both the front and the back side of the object, and all of the places where samples were taken are mapped. On the right, there is a table containing the labels given to all of the samples. And we will continue with these samples. The samples shown on the previous slide were taken from the same red twill fabric you can see here on the top photo. On the left side, there is a microphotograph of a fiber from the sample taken from the warp. And on the right side, you can see a microphotograph of a fiber taken from the weft sample. Both of the fibers are very fine woolen fibers, which can be identified from the scales that are both quite small in size and are sitting very closely to the fiber. They don't stick out significantly. Additionally, on this third photo, you can see several woolen fibers from the sample taken from the warp, proving that the yarn is made completely out of wool, not a blend of different fibers. Information that were obtained this way made possible the documentation of the types of fibers that make up all the fabrics on the object. There are many different textiles on the object, and the textiles are made both from animal and from vegetable fibers. Also, the fabrics that make the handbag have both the warp and the weft of the same type of fiber, which means they're not a fiber blend fabric. A fiber blend fabric would mean 2 or more types of fibers that were blended together before being spun into a yarn. Due to that, there will be different types of materials needed to consolidate and to support the existing textiles. And to conclude, this handbag illustrates the complexity and innovation that can be found in ethnographic objects due to its wide variety of materials and the fact that it is clearly composed of leftover pieces of fabrics that at the time were very costly and difficult to come by. When approaching the examination of any object, it is important to remember that each method gives specific information. That is why it is necessary to plan in detail what analysis methods will be used and if they require some preparation or sampling, that should be well thought out to minimize as much as possible the impact on the object itself. Revealing object details in technical construction and documenting the condition of an object are all significant for treatment proposal. And this brings us to the end of the presentation. I hope you find it interesting or useful. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And also, I've put my email again here at the bottom of this slide, so feel free to contact me that way if there is something I can help you with or if you're interested in something further. And thank you for all your time and your attention.